get off well.
Good evening, viewers. Nighthawk here, bringing you another review. Well, since it's October, you can expect me to do quite a few spooky videos this month. And what will the first one be, I hear you ask? I'll be reviewing an episode from the very first anime I remember watching, Grimm's Fairy Tale Classics. It was an anime adaptation of Grimm's Brothers Fairy Tales, produced by Nippon Animation Studios, and licensed and dubbed by Saban back in the 1980s. It ran for 2 years on Nickelodeon. While the series did have classic fairy tales like Hansel and Gretel and Cinderella, it also told some of the more obscure stories like Jordan and Joringel and Godfather Death. Yes. Not only is there a fairy tale where Death is the godfather, he got turned into a cartoon aimed at kids. Despite what the English theme song will tell you, not every story in this series has a happy ending, and a few of the episodes could be kind of dark and intense, which I guess is kind of being faithful to the source material, even though a few things are changed. If you want to know just how dark fairy tales could really be, I highly recommend checking out A Bit Frank and John Solo. I talked about an episode from this series 2 years ago. The episode I focused on was Bluebeard, which is quite possibly the most disturbingly realistic fairy tale I've ever heard. I mean, aside from having a blue beard part. Kinda makes me wonder why Saban dubbed that episode, but apparently didn't dub Godfather Death or the Water Nixie. At least I can't find dubs for him on YouTube. The episode I'm looking at is the series' 21st episode, called The Naughty Spirit, which is based on The Devil with the Three Golden Hairs. While most of the episodes in this series stay rather faithful to the fairy tale they're adapting, this one goes in a completely different direction. In the original fairy tale, the protagonist is a young man with unusual luck, destined to usurp a cruel king. Here we follow 3 young men, 2 soldiers named Ichabod Caleb and a drummer boy named Nicholas, who desert the army they're serving in because they want to spend the weekend in the local town. I can't really bring myself to call them protagonists, because Ichabod and Caleb really don't do anything other than whine and bully Nicholas through the whole episode. I mean, the narrator basically says the only reason Nicholas is here at all is because the 2 forced him to come with them. Well, okay, I guess I'll have to call Nicholas our protagonist, since he's pretty much the only one who's proactive during the whole episode. During one of the bullying sessions, Nicholas says he'd rather deal with Beelzebub, a demon that prowls the woods at night, searching for lost travelers to spirit away. And that's exactly what happens to them, because Nicholas said his name. I don't remember there's ever an episode in the series that mentions hell is in the place, but it's pretty obvious that's where Beelzebub takes them to, given the otherworldly surroundings and the physically aged souls forced to do manual labor. In the original fairy tale, the main conflict is that the king doesn't wish to lose his throne, so preemptively tries to kill the baby that will grow up into the young man the prophecy is about, only to discover that the child survived years later, and then send him to his kingdom with a message to have the boy chopped up into thousands of pieces. Fortunately for our oblivious protagonist, a thief with a moral code he meets along the way manages to forge the king's handwriting saying that the youth should marry the king's daughter rather than be killed. Unable to explain this to himself and to his queen, the king decides to give the boy the dangerous task of traveling down into hell and return with 3 golden hairs plucked from the devil's head. Here the conflict is that these 3 soldiers have been spirited away by a demon, and that the only possible way they can return to their world is if they can solve 3 of his riddles. So yeah, pretty clever from the source material. Turns out that all Beelzebub's riddles are so easy that every soul he's managed to capture has been able to escape, which makes you wonder why people considered him so dangerous, so that they're even so much as scared to say his name aloud. I mean, you think there'd be tons of people who'd be bragging about how they escaped from hell. If Beelzebub fails to keep these 3 souls entrapped, not only will he be forbidden from taking a seat on a council comprised of other demons, but his master will also banish him. I guess this was before he became Lord of the Flies. Trapped in a dungeon in hell, what will these 3 poor souls do to avoid a terrible fate? Oh, come on. I know Nicholas is responsible for why they're in the situation they're in, but you'd think they'd be trying to figure out a way to escape rather than threatening to beat him up constantly. And it turns out there is a way to get out of the dungeon, through the door that Beelzebub never locked. He even tells them that if they use the door, they actually would have been able to escape him. Nicholas does find another way to get out of the dungeon though, and by sneaking around, he's able to discover what the riddles Beelzebub has planned for them will be. Despite Beelzebub's riddles apparently being so easy, Ichabod and Caleb are so blinded by human selfishness and greed that they fail to answer 2 of the 3 riddles correctly. Nicholas, of course, is able to answer the first 2, but he never saw the third item Beelzebub presents him with, so he prays to heaven for the answer, and upon correctly guessing what the item actually is, Nicholas and his companions are freed from hell. This has to be one of my favorite episodes of the series, and I think it's largely due to Beelzebub himself. He's the villain of the story, but I find myself liking him way more than the protagonists. Probably doesn't hurt that he's voiced by Mike Reynolds either.
Stop that! Nobody gets away with playing on my boat!
And his master of the High Dungeon was voiced by Tom Weiner.
Spare me your pathetic excuses!
Actually, I think quite a few VAs who eventually turned up in Digimon got their start here. So there's a fun bit of trivia, I guess. While there are a number of episodes in the series that deviate from the source material, this one has very little in common with the fairy tale that inspired it, apart from traveling to hell, questions that need answers to, and outsmarting a demon. But I do kind of like how it seemed to be its own thing. And hey, how many kids cartoons in your name that had Jesus show up in them? This is Night saying, thanks for letting me share my thoughts. Please share yours with me.